Welcome. I'm Roberta Beattie. I'm a white woman with blue hair, and I'm sitting at my home desk with a blurred background. Today's webinar is The Missing Lens: Enhancing User Experience for Hidden Impairments. And we've got a guest speaker today. He's called Craig Pride from Different Breed, and I'll hand over to him in a few minutes. But before that, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour, including Q&A. You can click the CC button for closed captions. There's BSL interpretation, and that's available and should be spotlighted automatically. This webinar is being recorded and will be available alongside additional resources within 7 days. And you'll be asked to fill out a survey at the end. Sorry, I just had a bit of a distraction there. You'll be asked to fill out a survey at the end. And I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is for you to fill that in, as it helps us produce brilliant and valuable webinars like this one that we're doing for you today. So feel free to say hello in the chat. You just select everyone from the drop-down menu, and you can ask questions using the Q&A button. And you can also use the React buttons. Next slide, please. So for anyone who's not familiar with the Digital Culture Network, it's a free support and skills development service available to anyone in the creative and cultural sector in England. We're part of the Arts Council England, and our job is to grow and support the digital skills in our sector. And we've got 13 brilliant tech champions who can support you across a range of different topics, from your marketing channels and social media, your website and digital presence. We've got video content, audience research, survey and evaluation, advertising, e-commerce, and your strategy and data. And then there's my specialism, which is digital accessibility. And our tech champions can give you one-to-one support, which is completely free and unlimited. All you need to do is get in touch with the Digital Culture Network on the website. You click the Get in Touch link, and you tell us what you'd like to talk about. Then we'll get back to you with a link where you can pick a time and a date to chat to one of our tech champions. Before I hand over to Craig, I want to mention that today's webinar is suitable for people with basic to intermediate accessibility skills. There may be some concepts that are a little bit technical, but Craig's going to walk you through everything, and we'll be sharing resources for things he's showing you today alongside the recording. So that covers everything I have to say. And now I'll hand you over to Craig, who'll introduce himself. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, hello everyone. I'm Craig Pride. I'm a white male. I've got short black hair. I am hanging on to my hair. There is not a lot of it, but we will presume that it's there. And I have circular glasses as well. So what I want to talk to you about today is how we can enhance our user experiences for people with hidden impairments. So to jump in, I want to give you a little bit of a background to myself. So I am the founder of Different Breed. We're a disabled-led tech for good startup, and we advocate for inclusion through software in the event space. I used to be a software engineer at the Ambassador Theatre Group, Viva Tickets, and I've been a technical lead with kind of digital agencies and innovation across the UK and the performing arts sector. I'm autistic and I stammer, which is a speech disability, and I couldn't talk fluently till I was in my kind of mid-20s. And I use a method of word swapping and humour to deal with my condition. So sometimes I might say sentences that don't make 100% sense. So please do flag anything if you have any questions in the kind of Q&A, and I can come back and answer anything. And I'm also Scottish, so we've got all the kind of speech challenges with us today. So yeah, let's jump in and start talking about kind of hidden impairments. And I think the best place to start is if I start talking about my own kind of hidden impairments. So living with autism and the stammer, some of the challenges that I face throughout my kind of life is I struggle very much with phone calls. When I can't see individuals or I can't see how someone's reacting to my speech, it fills me with a lot of anxiety because getting the first word out can be quite difficult when people can't see you trying to speak, which results in people hanging up on you when you try and make phone calls. There's quite a bit of a challenge when it comes to speaking to strangers for the first time. when you have to kind of word swap in real time to try and get fluent speech out, and also from having kind of autism and struggling with social cues and understanding how people react to what I say, at times you can leave the wrong impression. So growing up, I did spend a lot of time alone because the majority of our world does operate in a spoken way. And that's where I found events and music because they are effectively my escape. Because the power of live events is that it brings people together regardless of their ability or situation. And it's the one place that I can feel equal. So to kind of start us off with a kind of open question, I'm not going to do a kind of style of like polls and things like that, but feel free to kind of let us know in the kind of chat. Is when you talk about different forms of accessibility at your kind of organizations, have you ever thought about people like me when it comes to accessibility? And the reality is that most people hadn't, because about 70 to 80% of disabilities are not visible. And I think that sets us up perfectly for what we're going to talk about today, is that we are talking about the forms of accessibility that are usually either not talked about during event meetings or can be easily missed because they're not the ones that we see day to day out in the kind of world around us. So what I'm going to cover in this kind of webinar is I'm going to first kind of have a bit of a chat around what a hidden impairment is. I'll then run us through some common challenges and kind of solutions to what people with hidden impairments face. I'm going to do a bit of a live demo, which we all know how live demos go. And then I'll chat a bit about kind of strategy around how we can involve both lived experience and also hidden impairments within our accessibility roadmaps. And then we'll jump into a bit of a Q&A. As a bit of a note, because I do stammer, I do put a bit more text on slides than some people would expect. So I will run over everything. Don't feel like you have to read everything. It's more there as a visual cue for myself. So if I stammer, I can easily come back to things. So let's start by chatting about what a kind of hidden impairment is. A hidden impairment kind of speaks for itself. It's an impairment that you can't easily see. And what I'm going to use throughout this kind of webinar is I am going to particularly focus on visual impairments and the forms of different kinds of kind of visual impairments, because that sets us up nicely to focus on a single area around things like visual feedback and also how screen readers are communicated with. So when we look at kind of visual impairments, this is a condition which affects an individual's ability to see, and that can range from mild vision loss to complete blindness. But it also covers things like color blindness, which some kind of interesting statistics are 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women are colorblind. So that's roughly 8% of the kind of male population, and give or take 0.5% of women. And 1 in 30 to 40,000 people can't see color or struggle with color, which means they will view kind of color in a more grayed out kind of a monochromatic kind of scheme. And over 2 million people live with sight loss, and roughly 1 in 5 people will live with sight loss in their lifetime. So I think this is a good area to focus on, because it's one that we probably either know people who are affected by sight loss, or we could develop sight loss in our kind of own lifetime as well. So now that we kind of know roughly what a kind of hidden impairment is, and also what a kind of visual impairment is, how do people with hidden impairments navigate the kind of web? And people with hidden impairments do rely quite heavily on assistive technologies to access and interact with our digital content. And that can be a kind of screen reader software, such as things like JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver, are some terms that perhaps people have heard before. Some people do rely on refreshable braille displays, which is a device that converts on-screen text into tactile braille characters. Other individuals might use high contrast settings, which transforms all of the colors into like kind of quite bright and a kind of clear a kind of contrast across things. And other people with kind of like partial sight might rely on software such as like screen magnifiers and tools like that, which will enlarge parts of a screen to help people read content easier. But many people with visual impairments do rely quite heavily on kind of keyboard navigation instead of using a mouse. And these kind of options that I have just kind of ran over are quite tailored towards visual impairments, but there's a whole range of assistive technology based on each person's kind of preference and preferred way how to interact with our kind of experiences. And that can range from the ones I just listed into things like a sip and puff device, which is a device which is fixed to a individual's kind of a mouth, which allows them to navigate a web through kind of sip and puff kind of interactions. So now that we know how people with kind of hidden impairments navigate our kind of experiences, we can now jump in and talk about what some of the common challenges for hidden impairments are across our kind of websites in particular. I think starting off here, we can really split it into two different ways, which is the kind of impact on our customers slash kind of attendees, and the impact on us as event organizers or kind of event teams. And the impact on customers is very much customers using assistive technology do struggle with things like a kind of like poor navigation and unclear structures, which really makes navigating our experiences quite difficult. Our websites do rely quite a lot on visual feedback, so things like kind of popovers and a kind of like context provided through kind of like a popover, kind of like add to cart success messaging, and things like error states being shown on forms. And what we do find is that within a lot of the kind of arts and culture space, especially when it comes to kind of booking tickets, is that a lot of our experiences can't really be completed by assistive technology, which leads to incomplete online journeys that force people to rely on support calls where people kind of phone your support teams in order to book, which obviously for people like myself with a stammer is quite a challenge and often leads us to using other lines of support like email, which means at times we will miss out on tickets because the phone line tickets go first. As an event organizer, what you will see is a kind of increased demand on support. So during a kind of on sale, if you require assistive technology users to phone you, that requires a lot of effort from your team. When people do abandon bookings due to not being able to complete journeys or become frustrated, we do lose revenue. And really, the kind of most important thing here is that by not having a kind of properly accessible experience, we miss out on connections with kind of fans and attendees, which could become long-term fans. So now that we understand what some of these kind of challenges are from a kind of high level, let's kind of jump in and explore a few of them in detail. And the first one I'm going to start with talking about is the way how we structure pages. And this is quite a technical area, and I'm going to try my best to use different kinds of analogies to make this not so technical. But really, the way how we structure our actual web pages matters a lot when it comes to assistive technology. And I want to make sure that I try and communicate this properly, because by getting structure right, we're able to set up the assistive technology for success, and we can also enable all kinds of assistive technology to actually interact and use our experiences. And what I mean by structure can be talked about quite easily when we look at something that we're probably all familiar with, which is a word kind of processing document. So using something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, when you create like a kind of document, you are able to set things like a heading 1, a heading 2, a heading 3, which will populate a little side panel and allow you to jump to sections inside of that document. And what that will also allow you to do is kind of understand what each section of a document is based on its title. But what we can also see through those kind of experiences is when we simply use like font size and like a bold, that won't populate inside of that kind of a sidebar kind of contents panel because we haven't used the correct headings. And our web pages work very much in the same way, that we have ways of kind of building web pages to allow content to be naturally grouped under headings. And when we don't use headings correctly, it can be really confusing for a screen reader user or kind of other assistive technology to actually navigate the experiences that we have. And what we find, particularly within kind of older arts and culture websites, is that they kind of lack modern landmark elements. And what I mean by kind of landmark elements is over the kind of last decade, the language which is used to actually code kind of web pages has been updated with key parts of a page, such as like a header which contains your like site navigation, your skip links, your main content landmark, and your like footer. And when web pages miss these key kind of landmarks and haven't been updated to include them, essentially assistive technology has no real structure to be able to jump about a page. And it means that users who are using accessibility are forced through kind of more frustrating experiences because they have to read everything on a page to actually understand what's there through their screen reader. And the way how we solve structure on our pages is we introduce what's called semantic HTML. And what that is what I just kind of touched on there, is that we now have elements which should be implemented into our web page, such as header, nav, main, article, and footer, and these represent different aspects of our page's content. And what this allows screen reader users and other assistive technology users to do is to understand, based on what tags have been used, what kind of content is going to be in that place across our kind of website. So if you imagine with a header, that's where probably your kind of logo and kind of site navigation is going to live. Your main is where all of your forms and booking elements are going to live. And your footers where your kind of contact us links, your privacy policies, and all of your kind of legal documents sit. And what we see there is that when we use the correct structure, it allows assistive technology to group content on our page, so screen reader users and other kinds of assistive technology users can jump to specific sections on that actual page and quickly navigate and complete actions that they want to do. And when we use the correct kind of structure and also the correct use of heading elements, so going from heading 1 down to heading 6, and ensuring that each page has a single H1 element, which enables you to specify a page title, and then heading 2 can be used to group content. So if we imagine that we have an event page, you might put event details within a heading 2 and book tickets within a heading 2, and that allows a screen reader user to easily see that they're on the event page and that there's an event description and a tickets section on the page that they can jump between. And it just makes the entire experience better for them. And by using these clear kind of structure elements and ensuring that we use modern kind of semantic HTML, we really set up all forms of assistive technology for success in our website. And from another angle, it's also really great for SEO and improving your kind of rankings from a marketing perspective. So that's structure. So structure is the kind of foundation. So you can think of that as a kind of Lego board in which you put Lego bricks on, which is each page of your kind of website. So getting semantic structure right is really important. The next challenge that people normally face when it comes to using assistive technology is excessive navigation. And what we mean by excessive navigation is when we include like mega menus on our website. So if you think in the context of, say, like a natural history museum's website, They might have quite a complex navigation structure, which could split everything into their exhibits in each category in order to help, say, like a school children find content as part of research and also enable people just to find things easily. But what we find on those websites is that unless you provide a way for someone to skip past the actual navigation, that a person in a screen reader or using keyboard navigation has to navigate through the full menu to get to the content. And what we find here is that on single pages, it can be frustrating, but when you think of it in the context of, say, like a 4-page booking flow, if you've got 28 menu items and you don't provide a way to skip past the menu for assistive technology, someone's having to go through 112 interactions just to get to the main content across those 4 pages. And really, that creates a lot of frustration and it can slow down user journeys, which can lead to things like cart expiries and people missing out on tickets for events just because they have a lot more navigation than everyone else. And the way how we solve the excess of navigation is we implement what's called skip links. And what skip links are is they are small kind of hyperlink interactive elements which are placed before a menu as the first kind of interactive element on a page. These can be hidden or they can be shown kind of permanently. But what we normally find is people hide these until someone navigates onto it using a screen reader or a keyboard. And what these landmark skip links do is they enable users to quickly move their focus to essentially different parts of our page by skipping the navigation if it's skipped to content, or skip directly to the footer if it's skipped to footer is placed there. And as a kind of baseline, we should be implementing skip to content and skip to footer because these help users quickly navigate through checkout forms because they can skip the navigation and just access the forms directly. And skip to footer is really good if someone wants to contact you or access your kind of legal documents or join a newsletter or find you on social media as an example. But really, when it comes to kind of skip links, we can go beyond basic support here and we can take a look at the actual user journeys that we want to enable. So, for example, in a booking flow, you might have a page reload every time someone adds a ticket to their cart, or you might have a multi-step booking flow where someone adds tickets, they select add-ons, they go through donations, and then they hit checkout. For someone visually, they would go through a page and click buttons like add to cart, and then they would essentially very quickly see like a checkout button appear and they can click it. But when you don't have sight and you are essentially using a screen reader, that screen reader user has to find that checkout button. So what we can do is also implement skip to checkout, skip to basket, and kind of use skip links as a way to allow assistive technology to quickly and efficiently navigate our user journeys and complete those actions. And when you implement skip links correctly, that kind of previous example of where we had 28 menu items on a kind of a natural history museum website, instead of that being 112 interactions, it becomes 4, which creates a much more streamlined experience for the user. Another challenge that we face within hidden impairments is our reliance on visual changes in context. So this is one that you've probably heard about a lot when it comes to accessibility, is about adding context to your what's on pages to describe what view event means. And the best way to describe this is if you imagine like a kind of what's on page and there's 12 cards being shown of events which are upcoming. To someone that has sight, they're able to easily see like eldergrass rhyme, they're able to see the description, and they're also able to see view event. So they have visual context of what's around that kind of view event button. But to someone who doesn't have sight or is relying on kind of keyboard navigation, they're going to naturally navigate through the interactive elements on our site. And what they'll hear is just view event being read out. So if you have 12 items on a list and someone knows that they want to go and see Eldergrass Rhyme live, they're going to have to step into each view event and then step back to be able to understand what that kind of context is for that kind of view event. And that creates quite a kind of not great experience when it comes to trying to quickly navigate and book for the one kind of like user journey which we want to follow. And this is the same for when it comes to things like add to cart. So we see like a page with a kind of like tickets listed on a general admission sale. You'll see maybe 10 or 12 add to cart buttons based on how many kind of tickets which you have. And for a user going through interactive elements, they're only ever going to hear add to cart. And unless you're providing additional context, they might not know what is being added into a cart, and they might need to also step back and understand context around it by stepping to the kind of parent element and then reading the heading and paragraph to understand. And even when like interaction happens, so when someone adds kind of like tickets into their cart, we will sometimes have a button which will animate and show a check mark, or we will have a popover which will visually say tickets added to cart. But when you don't have sight, unless you've set up those kind of feedback to actually read out information to a screen reader, the screen reader user will just hear add to cart button clicked, and then they won't hear any confirmation content or kind of feedback from that. They'll be kind of left unsure, which usually leaves assistive technology users unaware that their key interactions have been successful. So what we kind of want to make sure we are doing is both context and feedback is available within our designs. And that's when we look at these solutions here, one of the most impactful ways of essentially doing this is to focus on designing for both visual and non-visual feedback. So when you kind of work out user journeys, work out how you would communicate key aspects of that, which rely quite heavily on kind of pop-ups saying specific actions are successful, and figure out how we would communicate that in a simple, streamlined way to someone using a screen reader. And we can do that using sections which are called live regions on a page. They're little sections which can be programmatically updated with text that will be read out to a screen reader when the content changes. And that means that when we have buttons like add to cart, when you click add to cart, you are able to, first of all, add additional information onto add to cart. So add to cart could be displayed as add to cart, but there could be accessible text added to that kind of button, which would read out to a screen reader, add to cart 2 times general admission tickets. The user would then click, and that would then say button clicked, and then you would have feedback read out, which would say tickets added successfully to the cart. Your cart now contains 2 items, and it's the idea of keeping users informed both with context and with feedback to reassure them that their actions have been completed in the way that they thought it would. And that helps build confidence as they go throughout our journeys. And when it comes to that kind of like what's on page example of view event, very much the same can be applied. We can show visual users view event, but we can add additional kind of accessibility text onto our links, which would read out view event dinosaur exhibit or view event elder grass rhyme, which would allow users to quickly navigate through our interactive elements and understand what clicking those links will actually do. And the final challenge that I want to kind of talk about, because this is really just a kind of quick glance into some of the kind of issues. There's a whole lot more, and there's a whole lot more potential webinars, but we're going to focus on kind of finishing on color here. Is that we rely on color quite a lot when it comes to providing feedback to our users, and that could be within our seat maps when we tell users using red text that their selection is invalid because it leaves a single row, a kind of single seat empty in a row. Or it could be on forms when we indicate that like email addresses aren't formatted correctly, and a kind of like say like forms are invalid or tickets are sold out. When we rely only on color, it creates a problem for people who are colorblind. And the best way to kind of describe this is that when you have protan color blindness, which is a form of color blindness, you can't really see the color red, so it might become gray on screen. which means when you have a form, unless you have other visual indicators to show that kind of error, the person can't easily see it. And when we do display errors in a form, unless we've set them up in a way to be kind of like set up as being related to a form field, the screen reader won't actually read out the error message which we've placed in the form, which can leave a lot of users both sighted with kind of color blindness, and also users who rely on screen readers confused and not understanding why their kind of checkout experience hasn't kind of finished and they have got tickets. It's just kind of sitting there going and not doing anything as the kind of feedback. And when we go and look at a solution for color contrast, this is when the kind of we need to ensure high contrast colors. And we've probably heard a lot about contrast, and a lot of people talk about contrast, but no one really shows why it matters, or shows exactly how it looks to someone in a monochrome setting. And I guess that's where, when we ensure high contrast ratios, we can ensure that our designs still work when color doesn't exist, because it provides a good enough contrast between the element you are trying to essentially call out to users and the background color, which is set on the element it is within. One of the kind of easy wins from an accessibility point of view for people who are kind of colorblind or partial sighted is to introduce indicators. So use things like symbols and clear error message text and borders, because these help call out areas on a page to people that might miss them if they are using things like screen reader software or things like screen zoom software. And really, using icons helps convey the original meaning of color to someone who can't distinguish that kind of color directly, because we will naturally presume red means error or stop and green means success or go. When you can't see red or green, if you have, for example, like a check mark or a kind of warning symbol, that will allow someone without color to understand the meaning without having to immediately read everything on screen type thing, and give them the initial kind of jolt of, oh, something's went wrong. When it comes to screen readers and in particular errors within our seat maps and our forms, we want to ensure that when an error happens, we tell the screen reader that there is an error. So if they try to submit a form, update a live region and tell them that the form is invalid, and ensure that our error messages are linked to the actual form field which has a kind of issue, so that kind of screen reader can go back through each kind of form field and fix it until it says it's on until it says it is valid, and then they can submit the form. And really, one of the best ways to actually test how color works with our websites is to remove color altogether when you are testing a website. So view it through kind of monochrome settings, which I'll show you how to do in the kind of live demo through one of our websites. And there's a lot of Chrome plugins out there which will allow you to remove color and display things in grayscale. And it's just a case of seeing, can you still understand everything when color isn't being used? And that kind of gives a bit of a kind of a crash course into some of the problems and also potential solutions around what people with visual impairments face when they are using our kind of digital experiences. And really, what we have essentially done here is covered the foundations, and through testing, you will discover a lot more when it comes to feedback and context or color. And each kind of website has a lot of unique problems as well, which we can only see through actually testing using assistive technology. And now, when it comes to how do we test web pages for structure, feedback, and color, there's a lot of useful tools out there. So we can use tools like Wave, which I'll jump into on the live demo and show you an example of how to use. We've got Page Speed Insights and Lighthouse, as it's also called, to analyze kind of headings and landmarks, and that'll tell you instantly if your pages are kind of not structured great. But really, the best way to actually test for accessibility is to use some of the assistive technology that users will actually be using. So there's links in the kind of resources section, which should be sent round, which will give you a little crash course on how to use a screen reader. You should be able to actually navigate through your own experiences and experience it as if it's someone using a screen reader, and that's really the best way to test. When it comes to excessive navigation, there's a really easy way to test if you have working skip links, and that's to load up one of your web pages and hit tab and see how many tab presses that takes to see focus on the actual main content after a menu structure. And if it's more than a few tabs, you probably need to implement skip links at that point. And when it comes to semantic structure, we really kind of need to rely on tools like Wave to actually identify how our pages are structured. Unless you're a software engineer, then you're able to load it up and see it in kind of code. But I think it's a lot easier when we use tools like Wave and Lighthouse to see the structure of pages and how they're laid out. And when it comes to color, there's tools like WebAIM's color contrast tool. There's a resource slide specifically about color, so I could skip past it at this point, but that will help you test color contrast across your websites. And it's also built into the kind of Wave accessibility evaluation tool, which we'll run through in the live demo. And really, one of the most important things to remember when it comes to accessible testing is test user journeys and not just single pages. And that's one of the kind of failure points I've seen a lot throughout my career, is people will say, like, pull up a home page and go and test it for, say, keyboard navigation, then go, this is an accessible website. That's not really how we do accessibility testing. We should be testing our booking flows and the main kind of user journeys that result in what kind of normal users would handle. And if you can create kind of like user groups and bring people with impairments from your audience and to actually test those experiences for you, and it'll open up your eyes to ways and kind of user journeys that you have never thought of in terms of things. So what we're going to do is, I'm aware of time and I'm keen to keep time for a kind of demo. So we're going to jump into a little 5-minute live demo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use Wave, and then I'll take you through an example of what a good booking page is like and how context can be used greatly when using a screen reader. And then we can jump back into the deck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate over into the Wave accessibility tool, which you can find by going to one of the kind of resource links in this presentation, or you can search for Wave accessibility tool on Google and it'll be the first link. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in a web address that we want to test for accessibility. And I'm going to use the Metro because I'm keen not to offend anyone by using your website directly. So let's use the kind of Metro, and we can go in and see how the accessibility is on the Metro website. And we can see right now that when it takes a while to load and it finally does load up, that we can see that there's quite a lot of accessibility issues across this site. And we can see that the main ones that have been pulled out is the fact that there's no heading 1 structure on the page, which we can see at the top highlighted in orange. So within Wave, when we run each of our pages through here, we are presented with a summary tab, which will give you an idea of how much work is still kind of ahead of you. And then what we can also see is that when we jump into the details tab, this will present all of our errors to us. So we can see that the majority of the issues within the Metro website is missing alternative text on images. So alt text is really important. It's something I didn't cover today, but by providing proper alt text, we're able to inform screen readers of what an image is to provide the context that would normally be visual to someone who can't see the actual image on the screen. And it's also useful for when people are on kind of low internet speeds or they're offline, because it will show the alternative text instead of loading the image when there's no internet connection. We can also see that there's a lot of empty buttons in the page. So imagine what's happening on this page is that in order to actually click into any of these items, they're probably putting all of that kind of content within a button. So when you click the button, it navigates them. By doing that, unless you add accessible text to the actual button, it will just read out button to a screen reader, or it'll try and describe the entire content inside of it, which is not useful. So that's why it's flagged up as an accessibility issue. And then we're seeing that there's a lot of issues around very low contrast, and that'll be things like the blue text on black background, where it can be hard to read when you've got a color deficiency or you've got some kind of visual impairment that kind of brings in partial sight as an example. What we can also look at is reference, just basically tells you to look at the icon index, which allows you to step through each of the icons in the page and you can click them to see what they mean. Which is quite useful when you're kind of figuring out what needs to be done. When it comes to order, this allows you to see the navigation order of the page. So this is what the interactive elements would be on our site, and it enables you to see what someone is naturally going to navigate through when they only navigate through interactive elements to find something. And we can see here that the first element in the page is a link without any text associated with it, which is not great for accessibility because it'll just read out link. We then see that there's some effort that's been made. We can see links with a proper descriptive text. I'm not going to read out any of these, but we're going to jump down and see that we also have things like link Brooke Davis as an example. That might be an author, so it should probably say author page for Brooke Davis and give context to where it will land when you interact with that kind of element. And we can also see the structure of our page. So as we can see here, it will wrap each of our kind of landmark elements with a blue border and allows to see that we have a header with a navigation, and then it goes directly into text, and we can see that there's no heading 1 element on the page. We've only got heading 2. So when a screen reader tries to essentially navigate this experience, they are going to group things by heading 2, which would be top stories, live LA wildfires, and editor's pick, and they can jump through the sections fine. And then inside of each section, they'll see heading 3 and heading 4, which they can then navigate down based on the context of each heading. But the one thing that is missing here is we can see that there isn't a main content. So as far as a screen reader is concerned, when it comes to this page, there's only really a header and a footer, and then it's just content within that, which they will probably presume as being the main content, but we are missing the main content tag here, which will also be quite bad for SEO. When we take a look at contrast, this is where we can also click to see all of the examples of contrast, and we can see why they've failed and what level they've failed at. Depending on what level of accessibility your organization is aiming for, most of us are probably aiming for AA levels of accessibility, which means a considerable amount of effort has been applied towards accessibility. We can see exactly what contrast issues exist, and we can start playing with the values to see that if we drop the values down or we increase the lightness of the background, we can see we start to get like passes, and we can see what colors we need to change them to. And what's really important here is to ensure that we have at least a color contrast associated as a AA level pass to ensure that when people view our websites in monochrome, it is actually kind of visible. Now, what I'm going to quickly jump and do, because this kind of summarizes Wave, and it gives you a good example to be able to pass information back over to a web developer or someone who is able to fix those kind of items or go into your CMS and add alt text to your images. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop over and I'm going to take one of the links from a website experience that we've built before, because we know that this is going to rank quite well. And we can pop in that link and see the kind of difference of what a good accessible experience should look like within the kind of summary tab. So when this is finished loading, we'll see that we don't have any errors or contrast issues. And really, this is what we are aiming for, is addressing all the issues that have been raised within Wave. And we can also see that within structure, we've got the correct heading structure. So we've got the header, the main, and the kind of footer and asides being used. And each time a proper landmark element is made, this allows a screen reader to say, okay, we have a header element. We've got a couple of navigations, which will have a title for themselves. So for example, we've got a main site navigation, we've got a utility navigation. The screen reader can jump between them. We can then see main, which has got a navigation for the breadcrumbs. And you've got an aside, which is the like sidebar. And you've got the footer for the footer navigation, and someone can navigate easily. And we can see that the color contrast across here, nothing's been flagged, but we can see that if we did, that would pass at kind of AA and AAA level standards. So really that's how we test across Wave. And then in terms of just jumping in to give a little kind of like minute or two in terms of a proper optimized experience, is that when we come into a site such as like a booking page, which is an example I've created here, we have elements like our icons, such as like essential companions, signs, open captions, which if we just use kind of like icons, there's no real description to a screen reader. But if we provide screen reader text to it, when we hover over each of these, this will actually read out saying this event supports essential companions to those users. And the same when you get down to the actual kind of booking buttons down here, we can see that when someone wants to go in and click book tickets for Peter Parker, this will read out saying book tickets for Peter Parker open booking modal type thing. I'm just cautious of time, so I'm not going to turn on a screen reader and run through it, which I think would be good to do. But if essentially anybody does want to go in and run through this in the screen reader, there will be a link in the resources sent round as well. And I can come back to it in the Q&A if we really want to hear it. I'm going to jump back into the presentation now and just kind of take us through to the end so we can finish on the hour as we planned. So to jump into, so bringing us back from having a look at the tools which we can use and then jumping back into how we chart our accessibility journey. So how we chart our accessibility journey is quite important. And the first thing is that you should take stock of where you are. And that's really important because we don't expect you to be accessible overnight and we don't expect you to start from scratch. So we need to start looking at small, achievable changes that can make a difference now. And that's important, first of all, to understand who your accessible audience is. And that can be through running surveys, through collecting metrics, and understanding where the best areas for your return on investment is across your accessible user base. You should find the areas that interest you and interest areas of your kind of team, because that'll help you drive passion forward and keep these things in every conversation. And most of all, you should involve your actual audience and ensure that you're involving them in testing those experiences. Something that we've noticed happens quite a lot when it comes to delivering an accessible website, especially within the performing arts space, is we don't actually involve our disabled audiences in testing. We just assume that it's accessible and wait for the feedback, when it's just as easy to form a user group or perform an access audit with some of your actual audience and make that kind of part of the kind of delivery process. This will also help you understand kind of parts of a journey which has not been optimized or hasn't been really thought about. And then really we should enjoy the accessible journey and also make sure that we are also bringing people into our conversations and not their conditions. So what we usually find is that inside of RFPs and specs across our kind of industry, the actual planning documents mention things like wheelchair and assistance animal and essential companions. We should be focusing on the individuals and understanding their needs across their kind of hidden impairments, and we can only do that by involving them and understanding our audience. And that's where we have our accessibility standards, such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, our Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications, which is a mouthful, and our POUR acronym, which stands for Perceivable, Operable, Understandable, and Robust. And these are the foundations of any great accessible experience. So if you're a designer or an engineer, it's worth taking a look at those. And then what we can do as arts organizations is we can employ customer surveys, user groups, A/B testing, access audits. Secret shoppers are a wonderful thing, and I very much recommend them. And also attend webinars like this, where we can give you little nuggets of information to help you go away and figure out how we can actually make those changes. And all of these little things form your accessibility roadmap over time and helps you keep the changes that you want to make aligned with the audience that you're trying to serve. And along with a lot of the great resources that the kind of digital culture network have, we also provide really great tools for helping you understand and connect with your accessible audience. And we do this through accessibility information right now. So we can take your existing accessibility information and let you design interactive and custom accessibility guides that can be filtered based on your attendees' needs. and we provide you kind of detailed analytics to learn and understand the accessibility needs of your audience and see them in real time, and also collect feedback around the accessible information which you provide and your overall experience to improve. And this can also help you use real-time data to predict audience needs and trends. So something that we've seen really great is inside of festivals, people use our guides to anticipate demand for raised platform areas and allow them to put on hold a couple of additional raised platforms and create opportunities for disabled attendees to attend. And best of all, you can start for free at different breed.events and reach out for a demo if you are interested. This is the only part I'm going to talk about us. But then jumping in, as soon as we bring our customers back into the kind of spotlight and focus on making accessibility human again and understanding their needs, that's how we can work together and we can become a different breed. So thank you all for listening today. And I'll pass back to Roberta for the Q&A. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hello, Craig. Thanks ever so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. We've had a flood of questions come in. So I'm not sure that we're going to manage to cover them all, but we'll do our best to get through them. So the first question is, how can I check if my website is currently using semantic HTML or not?
Yep. The best way to check that is to run them through tools like Wave or through Lighthouse, and you'll be able to see the structure directly. There's a resource slide that has a link to a document / kind of article which will explain semantic elements. And you can cross-check against that to make sure that you've got the correct elements on your page. And you can always check with an access audit as well through an accessibility advocate, or a kind of specialist can tell you as well to help support you. That's the way I'd approach it.
Okay, so the next question, how do you correct a historical legacy of incorrectly assigned headers, especially if there's a high volume of content to update?
So yeah, so this is going to be a challenge, particularly in legacy content management systems. I'd say that you would likely want to have a chat with your development team and see if there's a way that you can programmatically do it in a kind of smart way to be able to adjust those headings automatically. Failing that, you would probably want to look into tools. I think there's is it Spider Frog or something for SEO, which can help tell you the pages that are incorrect. And you can run audits across your entire site using particularly SEO friendly tools, which will tell you when the headings are in the incorrect structure. It's quite a complex thing to do, but there's definitely ways to do it using tools out there to audit and create a spreadsheet for you to work through and make those changes.
Thanks for that, Craig. The next question that's come in is, with improvements to AI, do you envisage speech navigation taking over from things like skip links?
So this is something I am quite passionate about because I think AI has an amazing possibility to be able to help access it, like particularly users that rely on screen readers. Because when you look at like AI information which is being provided, we are already having to optimize our pages for the AI to get the information that it needs to read back. And we're seeing situations of where users are taking the images from websites and they're pasting them into like ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to describe it to them for better context. And that's where we've got systems like Be My Eyes, which is an app that disabled individuals can use to connect with someone to describe it to them. They're also looking at AI agents to be able to come in and improve things. But I think very much there is an element of where AI could be used effectively, but I think that's quite a while out yet, and we still need to rely on the kind of structure. And that's where structure is still important in that case anyway, because the AI would need to rely on the structure to understand the content that's within it and what it should be looking at. So it's a catch-22 in that case.
Fantastic. And there was a follow-up question to this question as well, which was, what excites you in the world of accessibility when it comes to AI technologies that are already out there?
So I think this is something which has been exciting for quite a while. So the one thing I'm following quite closely is the innovations that are happening between Be My Eyes, which is a app which can be installed on an iPhone or an Android. And it used to connect you with a kind of volunteer who would be able to describe information to you through the kind of seeing like a live video feed of what's in front of you. They've recently done a collaboration with the Meta smart glasses to enable to make that real time, and they're looking at AI. So eventually, we should have a way for kind of blind individuals to be able to kind of interact with the world around them and understand it without having to rely on other kind of people to help them do so. And that'll help create like a really easy day to day. And there's also really exciting things with a tactile feedback within sport, particularly where you can now get sport boards where you can feel the actual ball moving on a football pitch, and you can realize kind of like where players are by kind of tactile feel, and that's all done through kind of haptic feedback and AI and kind of real time processing. There's a lot
That's
of cool things
fantastic.
happening in AI now.
That's so cool. I think we've got one more time for one more question. So I'll leave it with this last one. And they ask, I use Wix to design my website. Will it have options to navigate through a screen reader and options to add all necessary solutions that you've described?
So in theory, it should. When it comes to visual designers, what I've found from my own personal experience is that the markup isn't particularly great with them because they're trying to do everything visually rather than actually coding it yourself. I think Wix is one of the exceptions of where there's quite a lot of accessibility of well-known accessibility advocates that work at Wix, and I think they're doing a lot of effort within actually enhancing those experiences. And I think that when it comes to website builders like Wix and like WordPress and things like that, there is a lot of work being done to improve. So anything that is limited, there might be a workaround if you Google to see how other people are doing it. And when it comes to actually testing for a screen reader, you can just load up a Wix website in a browser and navigate through it using one of the screen readers in your software. So that's independent of the software that's being used. So yeah, I think it's a catch-22 and it comes down to individual cases, is how I would answer that.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much, Craig. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you today and listen to all your incredible advice and your presentation. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be brilliant. I just want to thank Nicola for providing captions and Claire and Laura for doing the BSL today. Please do reach out to us for any support that you would want from our tech champions. There's some links on the screen that you can look at now. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar and the resources, and we will try and ask some of the questions that we couldn't get to today. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time at the end. There were lots and lots of questions, so it was a really popular subject, Craig. You did really well.
Awesome.
And don't forget the survey, because that's really an important bit for us. That would be brilliant. And yeah, check out our website for future events, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks ever so much for coming today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.